Welcome. Thank you, Katerina. Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to this fourth and final series of webinar. I believe that we've got at least 2 out of the 3 speakers. Welcome and thank you for giving us your time. Welcome, Aradhna. Welcome, Maloba. And Pravashan will be joining us shortly. And so I think we've got quite a packed program, and if it's okay with everyone, we'll just dive right in. I just wanted to say that the National Circular Economy Stakeholder Dialogue is a project that's sponsored by GIZ. So thank you very much, in partnership with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, DFFE, and it's being delivered by the Africa Circular Economy Network, ASEN, and CSA, Circular South Africa. We'll start with a word of welcome from GIZ. So I'll hand over shortly to Maya. We've got a poll in the webinar, and the intention of the poll really is just to give us a sense of the audience familiarity with circular economy. And then we've got exciting presentations from guest speakers, Aradhna Maloba and Pravashan, and we'll have an interactive sessions before I hand over to DFFE for the closing word. So without further ado, over to you, Maya.
Thank you very much, Gracia. Thank you for the opportunity to welcome the participants. And first of all, I really want to thank the esteemed speakers of today's session for their time and also sharing their valuable expertise and experience. And as Gracia mentioned, this webinar today is a part of a series of 4 sectorial dialogues. And we really have seen great participation and engagement from the participants in the dialogues that have been carried out on agriculture, manufacturing, and mining. So I really want to acknowledge and appreciate the ASEN and the Circular South Africa team for this great preparation and the facilitation of the stakeholder series so far. And also I want to take the chance to welcome and very much thank Dr. Janita Badul from the DFFE, who actually has been a highly appreciated partner of the GIZ Green Economy Transformation Project over a number of years. So yeah, I really take that great interest in the past stakeholder dialogues and also actually the large number of registration we have received already for the in-person stakeholder conference that will be held on November 14th, that shows actually that circularity is of importance for South Africa. So we are very happy to be able to support this stakeholder engagement series with the Green Economy Transformation Project of GIZ. And just to give you a short background about the Green Economy Transformation Project, it's a global project carried out by GIZ and commissioned by the International Climate Initiative of the German government. And the GET project is particularly supported by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection. And actually, especially this year, the Environmental Ministry in Germany is also leading the German Key National Initiative for Circular Economy, the development of a national circular economy strategy that shall be adopted this year. But these global projects, or with these global projects, the German ministry also acknowledged and understands that obviously achieving a transformation to a circular economy required concerted efforts, not only by one organization nor by one nation. So with that project, we aim to collaborate with partner countries and partner governments like DFFE in their aim to transition to a green and circular economy by collaboration and supporting them. And South Africa is actually one of the 4 partner countries of our project. We also work in Costa Rica, Argentina, and Indonesia. And as such, we are really happy to collaborate on that stakeholder series here. As we all know, it's not only a global issue of cooperation and shared efforts, but also for this transition, it needs the efforts and the contribution from all parts of society in every nation, be it the government through providing the regulatory framework, be it science, and technology, or entrepreneurs for coming up with innovative solutions. I think we might hear also something about that, or be it the private sector and finance for making actually the required investments. Coming from that space of green economy, circularity and the concept of circular economy has actually become a key lever and concept to not only address the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution and waste, but it's also more and more understood and as a lever to harness the opportunity for greater inclusion of social dimensions and also identifying the socioeconomic opportunities. And I think this is something we have been discussing in the past webinars as well. So today's sectoral focus, obviously, as all of you know, is of great importance for a sustainable economic system in South Africa. The energy sector is vital to the South African economy, but also faces significant challenges. Some inefficiency, heavy reliance on fossil fuels, and substantial waste generations are really some of the pressing issues. The sector as such is responsible for 80% of national greenhouse gas emissions and has a very high carbon intensity. However, when we apply to the energy sector circular economy principles, they could actually provide a framework for South Africa to address its energy security, to reduce environmental impact, and also to improve resource efficiency. So I think really embracing circularity can also bring socioeconomic benefits in terms of job creation, improved health, and also enhanced resilience. The circular economy initiatives can create new business opportunities and build resilience to local and global shocks alike, and contribute to the just energy transition in the country, where we just heard a lot of us are also working and supporting towards. And lastly, I think really focusing on circularity in the energy sector also can serve to impact the decarbonization of other sectors, and therefore contributes to the general country's national determined contribution to align with Paris agreements. So I'm very much looking forward to hear inspiring examples today on what is already happening regarding a circular energy system in the country, and also to engage and hear and discuss what is further needed to actually implement circularity principles in that sector. So thanks again to the great speakers we have, to our partner DFFE and to ASIN, and very excited about the insights and solutions that will emerge today, and I'm wishing all of us a productive and inspiring discussion and engagement. And thanks, and back to you, Gracia.
Thank you very much, Maya. And I think that you've set the scene really well for what the purpose of today's discussion will be. And so the next speaker is my colleague, Nobantu from ASIN. She'll give you an overview of the circular economy stakeholder dialogues, what the objectives were, and some of the details of the sector of focus that we've worked on to date. Over to you, Nobantu.
Thank you very much, Gracia, and welcome everyone. Thank you very much to all the colleagues on the call, and thank you to our guests as well. Thank you to our speakers for making the time to share your insights, and mostly to also the guests who are joining us. So my role here is quite simple in that I'm going to give you an overview of the objectives of the Circular Economy National Stakeholder Dialogue Series. So the primary objective of this dialogue series is to facilitate a national stakeholder dialogue focused on a circular economy in South Africa. This includes initiating discussions, fostering knowledge exchange, and contributing to developing effective circular economy strategies. The objectives, the primary objectives or the specific objectives of this series of dialogues, as Maya has already alluded to, it actually began a couple of months ago, and we started with the agricultural sector. We moved on to the mining sector, the manufacturing sector, and today we're focusing on the energy sector. Not to say that the other sectors or the other economic sectors are not important, but we wanted to sort of narrow it down to areas where there could be the greatest level of impact shown within the shortest possible time and with the resources that are currently available. So the specific objectives are really to initiate cross-sectoral discussions and foster knowledge exchange about the circular economy. This and then also the second objective is, raising public awareness and information about circular economy principles and interventions that are currently taking place in the market in order to promote a circular economy as a development tool for South Africa. Our other objective is also to bring together a diverse set of stakeholders around the different sectors to provide a collaborative platform around circularity. And lastly, to also gather input and feedback from stakeholders regarding the needs for either regulation or policy support in order to support a circular economy in South Africa. And I think for me, the one with this being our last webinar, I really think what I'd like to put out there is that for this to be successful, it's for us to all take local ownership of the process and of the actual just transition. So as much as we've got global partners and local partners, I think the partners that we have are here to support this transition. But at the end of the day, we're not going to see the results if we are not going to stand up and take ownership of the process and take ownership to make sure that these objectives are met. And in terms of the in-person event that Maya alluded to as well on the 14th of November, we're definitely looking forward to seeing a cross-cultural and integrated interaction amongst not only all the sectors, but also amongst different levels of representatives within the circular economy value chain. And with that, I think we are ready to start the events of the day, and we're going to start that with the poll. As Gracia mentioned, the poll seeks to it seeks to establish your level of understanding of what a circular economy is currently. So if you wouldn't mind, and over to you, Gracia, if you could fill in the poll and just give us an indication of what your current understanding of circularity is in a couple of words. Thank you so much. And I see there are some people also introducing themselves in the chat. Please definitely go ahead and do so. Thank you very much. Over to you, Gracia.
Thanks very much, Nobantu. And like Nobantu said, this is the last of a series of 4 webinars. So very excited. We've already received quite a high number of interest for the in-person event. So I hope that we'll see many of you at the in-person event. So you should be seeing a question here. We would encourage everyone to take part in the poll. Katerina, I don't know how is that going?
I think we need some additional motivation. So far, one person has volunteered themselves.
There is no right and there is absolutely no wrong answer to this. I think the purpose of this poll is to just help us understand the level of familiarity, understanding of the circular economy of the audience. And over and above that, we are very aware that, you know, the circular economy sometimes, depending on who you speak to, can be quite a complex process or concepts to actually decipher. And that's why the purpose of this series of webinar was actually developed, right? It's to help us unpack how this applies to across different sectors and also how this applies to our day-to-day, let's say, activities. So please, everyone, I think that we now have 5. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I see a lot more people are attending. So I'd encourage you, we'd allow another minute or so. Please go ahead. There's no right or there's no wrong answer. I see 6. Thank you very much, the 6th person. I can keep talking if that works as motivation.
Maybe it's also to say that last time we had a high engagement, so we are shouting out to all the energy sector people here and hopefully other sector people to participate. Okay, I think we can make 10. So we have 8 now. 2 more.
2 more people. 9, almost there. Right, we've got 10 out of 41. Thank you very much, everyone.
Perfect. Let me also just launch the results on my side. Okay, and then I'm going to share there. I'm going to end the poll now. Thank you for those that have participated. Okay, and let me just share my screen again. I think this should be visible. I'm going to zoom in slightly. I think this is more visible. Oh, no, it doesn't want to. It's jumping back. Okay. So I do think we see a lot again around resources and waste. Keep materials in use. Someone has studied the Ellen MacArthur Foundation manual quite well. Model of production consumption. Okay, and then we're going into sharing and leasing, reuse, repair. So the higher R letters that we usually have within the equation, so not immediately into recycling and waste management. Extend life of products, so product design, quite important. Model of production consumption again. Okay. And we're keeping materials as long as possible in the system and to maintain the value in the economy. Yeah. Ah, I like this one. Understood mainly as a recycling concept, and that is used as greenwashing. We actually call it circular washing nowadays. It is out there, unfortunately. And yeah, biomimicry is also kind of mentioned here around mimicking biological life cycles. So I think that's really great feedback. So I'm going to stop sharing again from my side. And then I'm going to share the presentation again.
Thank you very much, everyone. These are great answers. And also, I think it tells us that many of the people attending today actually are quite involved with the circular economy, which is great. So we expect tough questions from the audience. Awesome. So the next presentation, I'll take you through that, and it essentially circular economy 101. I'll talk through what is circularity. Katerina, thanks very much for agreeing to share the slide. So I'll just keep on guiding you by saying next. So the next slide, we always like to start here, which is that, sorry, if we go back, if the economy keeps growing, the earth simply does not have enough raw materials, whether circular economy or not, right? And we know that's been the kind of the linear model that we've used. Next slide. And so the linear economy is really business as usual, where we have made these blunt assumptions that there are infinite resources and that the earth is capable of infinite regenerative capacity. And so it's take, make, and waste. We extract resources and put it through a process, production, distribution, consumption, and then disposal. Next slide. By generating waste. But if you look at waste, waste really is a human concept, right? So nature doesn't really know the concept of waste. So an example in nature, especially when you look at animals and the biosphere, waste really is food. Yet our economy is built on a wasteful production of goods and services. So we've really come to accept as a society that pollution and resource depletion are unavoidable consequences of modern society and economy. And we can see that, right? A lot of the effort that we see are always end of pipe, it's waste management, etc., etc. Next. So this is quite a powerful concept. So I heard about it recently. I don't know if everyone is familiar with country overshoot days. What this represents really is the rate at which we are on an annual basis, we are essentially using resources versus the rate at which resources are being regenerated on the planet or on the ecosphere. So I don't know if you can spot South Africa, but it's right at the bottom. So around June, South Africa is listed with Argentina. So the date for South Africa is the 20th of June. What that means is that we have essentially exhausted the resources that would have helped us get a neutral balance. And so we are running on borrowed resources for this year. So we are running beyond, from June onwards, we were running beyond sort of the resource balance. And I think globally, if you look, there's a green line, it's around about August, just indicating that from a linear economy perspective, the rate at which we've been using resources growing is just not sustainable. It exceeds the rate at which resources are being regenerated in the planet. So next slide. I think just to also convey the same message, but in a different format. So this is one that talks about resource extraction, material extraction in billions of tons of material. So if you look in the 1970s, it was just about 30.9, if I'm not mistaken. And in 2020, it was about 95. So almost tripled. And we expect this based on the research done to exceed 100 billion tons of materials being extracted and used this year in 2024. Next slide. So what is the circular economy? Right. So the circular economy is based. I see that there's a lot of, sorry, everyone. I see that there's a lot of engagement in the chat. That's great. Please continue engaging with each other. We'll try and monitor if there's any questions, and we'll make sure that if we don't have time to answer it via this chat, we'll just answer directly via the chat. So the circular economy is based on 3 principles. The first one is designing out waste and pollution. And I think we saw a perfect answer from one of the audience member that took the survey. The second one is keep product and materials in use. And the third one is regenerating natural systems. Next. So this is quite a powerful graphic that the UNDP has developed to demonstrate or illustrate circular economy systems and how we can adapt circular economy systems, how we can transform the linear economy to a circular economy system. So if you look here, let's start with the linear as the diagram I showed earlier. So it's extraction, production, use, and end of use. And if we move on to the next slide, what you see is that we can create a couple of steps. I think the first one between use. So the first loop is actually reusing the material or the product itself. The second, reducing, sorry, the use of the material and the product itself. The second one would be reuse. So these are, closing the loop and almost cornerstones of circular economy principles. And then when we move to the left, you would see repair, going back to production, refurbish, and then remanufacture. And right to the left, end of use, the opportunity there would be repurposing, and that goes back to production if it becomes another product, and or recycling. What it shows is a lot of the time, the conversation that we've had about the circular economy really has been focused on like recycling and repurposing, while there is a massive opportunity around reducing, reuse, refurbish, repair, and remanufacturing. And so in the next slide, what we've been doing is we've been looking downstream, but what can we do upstream? And so that's from extraction. That's where the role of design comes in. So reducing by design or circular design, where really the intention is that we produce or we design very intentionally products and or materials that are essentially suitable for repairability, remanufacture, etc., etc. And then the next slide. So we've been focusing a lot on material, but the circular economy system really is based on integration of natural. The circular economy system relies actually on the integration of energy, water, biodiversity, and then us. So as people, we are part of nature, we are part of the global ecosystem, and we are part of the circular economy system. Next slide. So this is yet another butterfly slide, and this has been adapted from, I think, the original butterfly slide was developed by the Helen MacArthur Foundation. And so on one of the side, you see sort of technical elements, so recycle, reuse, etc. And on the opposite side of the butterfly, you see sort of biological nutrients. So it's the biosphere, regeneration, biogas. I saw one of the comments talk about the role of biogas when it comes to circular economy in the energy sector. And all of that comes at the center, and that's essentially building equitable and inclusive societies and circular economies. Next slide. Right, so when we look at what I decided to do is, I think when you look at originally it's 3 core principles, but really we are part of the ecosystem, right? So we've added a 4th one, and so circular economy lies on 4 principles: it's designing out waste, keeping materials in use or at their highest value as much as possible, regenerating natural systems, and then benefiting all members of society. What does that mean when it comes to South Africa? So the South Africa economy is about 6% circular, and this is based on a material flow analysis that was conducted in 2017. yes, it is material focused, but it's actually quite a good starting point. And it also helps us gauge how we're doing compared to the global economy. I saw a comment, I think, from one of the participants about how is South Africa doing relative to the rest of the world. The next slide. Right. And so that's, in conclusion, there's about 94% resource inefficiencies to target. What do these represent? It's really the opportunity to increase circularity, but also create value across all the sectors in South Africa. And this would lead to global competitiveness, improved resource security, decoupling economic development from energy and water needs and constraint, especially in the context of South Africa, fair and equitable job, which is really a topical of importance in the context of South Africa, increased profits, especially where inefficiencies are addressed, improved living conditions and health. And there's been lots of studies done about communities in the coal mining areas, and coupled with environmental benefits in the context of South Africa is really decarbonizing the power sector, as Maya highlighted earlier on. And so this is my last slide. So bringing us to today's discussion, based on the 2023 Integrated Resource Plan, there will be an additional 29 gigawatts of renewable energy added to the grid by 2030. And so in the context of today's discussion, there's lots that can be said, but one thing is that these will result in really large volumes of obsolete equipment in the decades to come. So end of life, we expect, I think the standard is about 20 years. So what happens to all the plants? What happens to all the equipment? What happens to all the solar panels once these have been decommissioned? So the circular economy for the renewable energy sector in South Africa can, one, reduce pressures on natural resources, especially critical minerals. One of the case studies that we'll present will expand on how that can be done and how that's being done. To create sustainable economic growth and jobs. I think that will be the first case study with Manova presenting some of the work they've been doing at EDP. Reduce supply chain risk, and I think we've all been exposed to supply chain challenges, especially during COVID, and we know the impact of that on economies. And then lastly, chart innovative pathways for net zero economies. So this is the end of my presentation. I think I might be running out of time already, so I'll hand over to, without further ado, to the next speaker. Oh, sorry, I forgot that we have the second poll. Is everyone ready to participate? Hopefully we see more people this time. So the second poll is, which circularity principles have you applied in your field or in your day-to-day role and or company? And there are 4 presented here that you choose from. So designing out waste and pollution, keeping materials at their highest value, regenerating natural systems, and benefiting all members of society. We'll allow the poll for another minute or so before we close. I see less than 10, so I'd encourage anyone and everyone to contribute.
We almost, yeah, we have more than 50% now,
Awesome.
but it seems that
Thank you, everyone.
that like click on answer is much easier than typing. So I'm going to end the poll and then we're going to see the results.
Awesome. Thank you,
Let me-
Katarina.
You're welcome. I think it should be visible now on your screen.
The result, at the moment, we still see the question itself. Not yet
Okay,
the
let
result.
me okay, let me see if I can share, because I did share.
You can see the results.
Oh,
You
can you see
the result? Okay, so
Okay.
it must be me then.
results from browser? Okay, then I need to go back. But I think what was very nicely seen that we have seen in the other webinars as well, it's quite an equal spread, but the spread is mostly on the second principle around keeping materials at their highest value. That's what we see as well also in the other webinars. So thanks everyone for participating, and we're going to share also the results after the webinar with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Katerina. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Aradhna from Impact Catalyst. So Aradhna, if you just give me a minute to introduce you, and then I'll hand over. So Aradhna is currently the head of the Department of the Just Energy Transition at Impact Catalyst. She holds a bachelor degree in electronic engineering and a master's degree in electrical engineering. She serves as a technical board member at SIGER, I hope I've said that correctly, South Africa, representing the country in the International C6 Study Committee on Active Distribution System and Distributed Energy Resources. She is also a registered professional engineer with EXA. She's a global expert on just transition, energy economics, grid impact analysis of distributed energy resources, and green hydrogen economy. She has gained immense experience from working both at ESCOM at the CSIR and at Impact Catalyst. Aradhna is leading all work related to just energy transition with the aim of using collaborative platform to create significant socioeconomic impact. The focal point of this work is to promote social justice, create unique opportunities within a successful just energy transition with the purpose of combating poverty, unemployment, and inequality in South Africa. We're very honored to have you, Aradhna. Over to you. I think I'll let you then share your screen with the rest of the audience.
Okay, great. Checking if you are able to see my screen now.
It's loading. Yes, we can see it now.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Aradhna Pandaram, and as is mentioned, I'm going to take you through the sectorial challenges and opportunities for circular economy in the energy sector. I think we understand the needs around the energy sector as a whole in terms of trying to incorporate circular economy principles, but I think it's still very much lacking in terms of actual application and what we've seen. If you look at just the energy sector as a whole, and if we talk about decarbonization, I think we would understand that for South Africa, our greenhouse gas emissions actually about 46 or 47% actually come from the electricity sector. But in the energy sector as a whole, as was mentioned, out of that 80%, there's still quite a significant amount that is in different subsectors of energy itself. But I'll focus more on the electricity value chain first. So basically, I think we all know, we have generation that ESCOM mostly is involved in, but now with the independent power producers that have come in, this is slowly being introduced in terms of competition and bringing on other private sector players in generation. But from a generation business, I think there's where our coal power stations are, our large wind and solar are, our gas stations are, and basically this is the focal point of where our energy or electricity is actually generated. Then we have transformers, and I think a lot of people forget about the transformers that actually have to, increase or decrease the voltage within the electricity network. And here you can just look at the components that you can actually see within the value chain that have opportunity for circular economy. I can just give you an example. Just yesterday we were talking about this in the SIGRE feedback session, where we spoke about new designs of transformers that look at incorporating different materials rather than the old normal conventional transformers. For example, we normally use copper for windings in the transformers, but now what we are considering is aluminium windings, which is a little bit harder to actually do, but it actually can incorporate circular economy principles, because actually copper is probably one of the most critical minerals that we are going to run out first globally. So that is something that we really need to consider. And copper is actually used in almost every part of this value chain, if you look at it from an electricity perspective. So after the generation and generation transformers, you also have the transmission lines, and there, for example, there's the big lattices that you would see, and the long transmission overhead lines that you will also see. that transport the electricity from the generation points to where the demand is. And here again, there's significant opportunity for circular principles. I know you may know we are going through a process of upgrading quite a lot of transmission network in the Northern Cape and within that belt between Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and Western Cape. And there, if we can incorporate the redesign thinking in terms of looking at different materials and circular economy principles, it would offer a great opportunity again for that, because these equipment actually last 50 years. So it's not generally known to have short periods. And if you're investing now, you obviously want to invest in something that can give you a long lifespan as well. So, and then you move on to the distribution transformers and similar principles to the generation transformers. But after that, you're moving now into this new view of the unbundling of Eskom that we see in South Africa. So the reason why we're actually unbundling, or one of the reasons, is to actually try and create competition within the distribution sector between end users of the electricity in South Africa. And now we have actually unbundled the transmission company completely. So they are a separate legal entity, still reporting to the holdings company, but they are now their own company that has to create their own sustainability in terms of finances and going forward for that business. And the same would happen in the distribution sector. And what is going to be seen, as you can see, there's a lot of rooftop PV that many users have installed because of load shedding and other reasons. But it's also seen as one of the cheaper forms of electricity if you look at the levelized cost of electricity. But that is then creating a different space for the electricity value chain going forward, where we would see this prosumer rather than just a consumer at the end of this value chain. And this can actually be an enabler for circular economy principles going forward. And I'll explain a little bit more in terms of how we can actually enable that space going forward. So I think from a generation perspective, I think everyone knows that our electricity, most of our electricity comes from coal, even though we have quite a lot of renewables that have been installed at a significant rate that we've never seen before in the past, I would say 5 years or so. We have had the program from 2011, but in terms of the pace, I think in the past 5 years, we've seen a significant jump in terms of renewables. But this is already showing that there's a significant need for us to divert our attention in terms of looking at other regenerative principles, as was mentioned by Gracia, into our generation mix as well. And in terms of the challenges that I foresee that enable circularity in the energy sector, I think, firstly, as I've mentioned, this carbon-intensive energy mix, and this comes along with pollution and comes along with premature deaths due to pollution. That actually, you know, is quite a sad story if you think about it, and if you've seen what has happened in Mpumalanga and spoken to the community in Mpumalanga. So there's definitely a dire need for us to change this energy mix. And I think we are slowly on that path, and the IRP 2023 does give us some hope in terms of that. Let's hope it is updated a little bit more and is incorporative of more opportunity from a renewable perspective. I think one of the major things we are lacking is energy efficiency measures. So I actually convene an international working group on energy efficiency. And I hear about what Europe is doing and what the other parts of US is doing in terms of energy efficiency, and we are so behind. In terms of South Africa, I think one of the major things we're looking at is just changing out light bulbs and looking at solar geysers. But there's so many other aspects that can be incorporated in that whole value chain to actually help with energy efficiency. If you note from the Conference of Parties of last year, they said that we need to triple the renewable energy capacity and double the energy efficiency measures by 2030. And I think we're very much behind in terms of how to actually create that optimal use of energy efficiency in the ecosystem of energy and electricity. So I think there's significant opportunity that may be related to regulatory challenges, that may be related to other challenges, but I think we definitely need to incorporate this as one of our key priorities going forward for circularity. In terms of the next point, I said there's a lack of flexibility in infrastructure. So one of the energy efficiency measures, for example, that's implemented internationally is the use of flexibility from an end-use perspective. So when there is this distribution competition and aggregators and other forms of distribution system operators that have been created out of this distribution market, the market actually enables the use of flexibility as a tool for energy efficiency. And when I say flexibility, I'm meaning in terms of being able to switch your geyser off very, very quickly, or you know, in terms of transient changes, being able to change your system in terms of you know, how you actually use the infrastructure within your household. So there's quite a lot of initiatives that can be taken from a flexibility perspective. But that takes me to my next point. We actually don't have that energy market that has been developed yet from a distribution perspective. So yes, at transmission level, it's been spoken of. It still has not been implemented per se, but from a distribution perspective, we actually are in dire need of this market. This market can actually enable all of these efficiencies measures, as well as flexibility measures and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions all in one, just through incentives. And one of the options, for example, is just creating a time of use tariff for residential users. It's not being implemented at the rate that we need to do that. And that is just, you know, the first part. In terms of actually a market, you actually now incentivize according to what your system actually needs. And if you focus on an objective of reducing you know, your greenhouse gas emissions, then you can easily incorporate that in terms of the incentives you actually put out in this market. But to enable this market, you also need enabling infrastructure and enabling ecosystem. So you need to have everyone to have installed smart meters. For example, you need to have everyone to have access to a market, to be able to bid, to be able to you know, select which operator they would choose, or what form of energy they would choose. One of the aspects is in electric vehicles, for example, is being able to use electric vehicles as a vehicle to grid mechanism, where you can actually use the battery in the vehicle to supply your household, or even sell at times where you know, there is actually grid pressures in terms of peak loads. So those are some of the aspects that need to be enabled from a market and can drive these circular options as well. There's obviously the grid capacity challenges, and this is looking at large-scale implementation, especially in the Northern Cape. We know that the best solar resource is in the Northern Cape, the best wind is in the Western Cape and around the Eastern Cape. So there's significant grid challenges there where you can't install wind, for example, 4.2 gigs in the last bid window was actually not approved for grid connection. And this is posing a lot of challenges in terms of actually incorporating circularity in this energy sector. And I think the other aspect is, you know, if we just look at the value chain that Gracia has shown us, proven investable technology for circularity, I think there are some risks with regards to financing of circularity in the sense of enterprise development or new business development. And it's because these innovation technologies or options have not necessarily been proven and you know, at the technology readiness level of 8 or 9, where you can actually just say it's commercially available and all of the risk has been, proven out of that system. So I think that's one of the challenges that we also need to deal with going forward. In terms of the opportunities for circular economy, I think you may know that there has been a report that was published from the CSIR, and that was when I was part of that project, and it is available on the CSIR website, where you can see where we've unpacked all of the options for the energy sector, and we've actually gone out and done surveys from the sector itself to actually see who's adopting what and what can be adopted going forward. So these are some of the options that are representative in that report. Obviously, renewable energy, I think everyone understands the need for renewable energy as a regenerative resource. Bioenergy and biogasification, I think that's one thing that we're definitely not making use of. And I think here again, it's about proving the technology one, but also ensuring that a value chain has been created. So I know that there has been some pilot plant in one of the local municipalities for a waste to energy project, but that project or that pilot plant is just sitting there without no application or functionality, because nobody is constantly working at it. So you must note that even though you may install something or put something on the ground, it may not necessarily continue to work because you've not created the value chain and endorse that value chain as well. So I think those are one of the aspects that really need to be thought about in that sense. I know in the Impact Catalyst, for example, we're looking at waste pickers and formalizing waste pickers for plastic waste in the Northern Cape. But if we can incorporate that, you'd need to incorporate, the waste pickers, the buyback centers, and then, taking the logistics to the plant, and also in terms of whatever the output is, what do you do with that? So I think that those are the aspects that really need thought and sustainability in terms of how you create it. Looking at the next option, obviously agrivoltaics, I think this is an option that we don't generally jump to, but that can actually have a lot of socioeconomic benefits because it has two revenue streams. You can have PV as well as your agriculture at the bottom, and that is creating jobs for agriculture, as well as a revenue stream in terms of food, or even being able to provide food to the community. So those are aspects that I think we're not thinking about enough. Obviously, renewable energy supported technologies like energy storage and new energy vehicles. I think just in South Africa, from a new energy vehicle perspective, charging stations, they are coming up, but I think I have a new energy vehicle, but I also struggle to find this all the time everywhere. So, enabling and creating those ecosystems, I think is something that definitely needs to be done. Hydrogen, obviously, this is a big topic. I know in South Africa, we're looking at green hydrogen. And I think in the value chain itself, there's a significant opportunity to actually use wastewater and actually treat wastewater for the input into green hydrogen. So that is an option there. Then carbon capture, I think everyone understands carbon capture. But I think here, again, proven technology that is commercially available, that can actually, make financial sense. That's one of the aspects that is still being grappled with from a carbon capture perspective. Energy efficiency, I've spoken to that quite a lot, but I think we also need to incorporate the design of the equipment in terms of the energy efficiency going forward. Retrofitting technology in coal plants. So there's a lot of options here. One of the options is fly ash valorization, where you can actually use the ash for construction material. And I've heard recently that in the transmission network and distribution network upgrades, Eskom is actually thinking of using this ash as input into the construction base of the plinths or the construction material that's required for the structures itself. And that's such a clever use of, the ash that is actually coming out of the coal plants that we already have. So I think there's opportunities there. A circular design of technology, I think we've spoken about this. But if, for example, in renewable energy, we note that for wind, I think Siemens Gamesa has just produced the 100% recyclable wind turbine, and that is so great. I think that that's the direction that we need to move into, where we can actually design it from scratch to actually incorporate those principles. Repair and recycle, I think everyone understands that, and I think that that would be expanded a little bit more in the other presentations. So I think here I just wanted to speak about integration of circular economy in the renewables rollout. I think holistically, I think we need to definitely incorporate proper end-of-life plans. I think sometimes it's just considered as a tick box exercise and for your environmental impact assessment. But I think we really need to incorporate that into a value chain and show how you can actually implement that, almost like, you know, a closure plan for a mine. I think it definitely needs to be incorporated at the start, and you know, budget needs to be put aside for that so that it can be incorporated and implemented. Incorporation of energy efficiency measures, I think, in grid infrastructure as well as demand side management. This can be incorporated in whatever renewables is being input in terms of that. From a practical perspective, so I think what we can do is we can implement policies that actually incentivize and promote recycling and energy efficiency. I think here the energy markets is one way we can do that, but I think that there can be other ways to actually promote recycling in the value chains. We can also implement requirements that drive end-of-life management of components. So here again, I think if, for example, from the REAP program, I think we need to incorporate, maybe it is already there, but I think in terms of monitoring and evaluation and being able to hold people accountable when things don't happen, I think that that's definitely needed. Maybe the REAP is more stringent, but now we're talking about embedded generation, and that doesn't need the same requirements from a REAP perspective. So how do you hold people accountable when you actually don't have that mandate in terms of that? So I think we definitely need to look at those options from that perspective. Incorporation of second life materials, I think this is so important. In India, I know they are already incorporating, you know, second life PV panels as well as batteries for low income microgrids for electrification. I think it needs to be done right. I've heard horror stories about, you know, PV panels just shipped from Europe that are in a container with no boxes. So I think definitely, you know, it doesn't need to be seen as a throw your waste here kind of initiative, but I think we definitely need to look at how to actually incorporate it. How do you actually bring regulation in that? Because I know Revolve, for example, is in the second life battery space, but in terms of regulation, in terms of testing the second life batteries, there's not necessarily a lot of information and requirements around that. So we definitely need to create that ecosystem that enables that, so that we can actually, you know, look at this value chain and incorporation going forward. For example, I think from a PV waste perspective, I read, you know, PV waste.
So sorry, Aradhna, Nobantu is the strict timekeeper, and I think we've kind of run out of time. So I'll ask you to wrap, if possible, to wrap up in the next minute or so.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Sure.
All right. So yeah, I think I've spoken to waste to energy, and I've also spoken to fly ash for construction. And I think reusing and recycling materials from decommissioning, I think I've touched on that a little bit. I think from an enabling ecosystem perspective, I think these are themes that I've been mentioning, so it's not new, but I think from an energy market perspective, we need to incorporate those incentives as well as being able to implement the market. And for that, we actually need distribution system operators with data-driven forecasts and operations. And this is where AI and cybersecurity also come in, where we need to ensure that, you know, we cover all our bases in terms of how to actually incorporate this in our operations. Energy audits, this can also be a way to incentivize reuse of waste heat, for example, in industrial purposes. I think there are some implementation with regard to the EPCs that are being implemented, but I think we definitely need to drive it a little bit more. And then smart grids with smart meters. So understanding what technology is required around that, and the incorporation of the infrastructure that needs to go with that to be able to do that. For policy gaps, I think we look at, there being a lack of policies to enable circular economy. We speak about it in different languages and different terms, but I think that definitely needs to be incorporated as one holistic policy. Carbon tax, we are definitely lagging in terms of being able to implement this properly. I know there's just, some carbon tax being spoken about at a regulation perspective, but we need to incentivize decarbonization. The incentives are actually adopting circular economy initiatives. That's one way of also being able to drive it. Recycling, end-of-life management being mandatory. That's in the regulations and policies itself. And I think the regulations that support the second life of materials. Lastly, where I see opportunities related to decarbonization, I think encouraging the promotion of renewable energy, bringing the source closer to the demand, the energy source closer to demand. That's definitely one way that we can look at it. Promoting community-based renewable energy, speaking to the same thing in terms of bringing the source closer to demand. But this can actually help to support the communities themselves. Promotion of waste to energy value chains. Again, the value chains. We definitely need to look at it as one whole value chain, not necessarily just the technology and put the technology out there. Promotion of bioenergy, biogasification, and then second life economies, and then recycling. We can do this through public-private partnerships, but we need to definitely drive it in terms of a mechanism that can actually work. And lastly, I just want to say energy efficiency is definitely so essential to decarbonization, and we definitely need to look at better ways to incorporate this in our business. And thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you very much, Aradhna. Really appreciate it. I think she's done a great job at giving us an overview of, circular economy opportunities alongside the value chain, some of the challenges specific to South Africa, and also the opportunities. So without further ado, we'll move on to our next speaker. Unfortunately, we are running behind schedule slightly, so I'll ask the next speaker, Maloba and Pravashan, to stick to time. It's about 15 minutes, if possible. And that would allow, and the audience, I see there's lots of engagement. This is super exciting. If you've got any question, please post it in the chat and we try and monitor to ensure that the speakers respond to you directly. Over to you, Maloba. I think you can take over the screen and share your slides. Sorry, apologies for my rudeness. Here's
you don't need to
let me do the
me.
introduction to Maloba, for Maloba. Maloba is a passionate leader. I've known Maloba for almost 2 decades, so he's someone I admire deeply besides being a friend. Maloba is a passionate leader committed to advancing sustainable development across the continent. A proud Mosotho professional, Maloba serves as the head of advisory for ED Platform, where he leads the company advisory services, offering strategic guidance and insights to clients across various sectors, and renewable energy being one of, I think, their largest sector. He is responsible for building and managing relationships with key stakeholders, developing tailored solutions to complex challenges, and ensuring the delivery of high-impact sustainable outcomes. Before joining ED Platform, he was instrumental at the Innovation Hub, where he led technical aspects of the incubation support for clean tech entrepreneurs, providing both mentorship and hands-on technical assistance. He also supported the Gauteng provincial government in advancing clean energy initiative, contributing to the regional sustainability goals. So over to you, Maloba.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Gracia. Is my screen visible in the right format?
Yes, we see your screen.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cool.
So I'm going to start with this slide and just get straight into it. did a bit of research to try and find definitions for what the circular economy is. And the parts that I've highlighted are sort of the basis for my presentation. I think the first one from chathamhouse.org, speaking about waste management and recycling, are part of the responses we saw in the poll. And then economic opportunities is almost a deviation that is of interest. And then the second one from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, coincidentally, same one that's been, I guess, mentioned here. Again, the first part about materials and waste and regeneration, I think is on track. And then the last part is about the circular economy, tackling climate change and other. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback from one of the participants here. Thank you. And other global challenges, right? And the angle of approach for me, and I think Aradhana has done a fantastic job talking about the technical aspect of the resources inputs into the renewable energy sector and needing a very, very serious plan. And I agree completely, a very, very serious plan around what happens when those facilities come to their end of life. And needing to make sure that we manage those, and not just manage them, but proactively try and make sure they fit into a circular economy. So I'm going to speak about the other side of it, which I think is a very, very important part of the circular economy, which is the social side, the people side, right? We understand the material, or we are coming to terms with the material and the technical side of it, but what does it mean to build circular economy flows in renewables that consider the social aspect of these projects as well, and their impact. And so how I've thought about it is, the interaction is obviously in terms of renewables, or part of the CE by virtue of their renewable resources and them not having waste products. Aradhana has talked about the second point around materials, input materials, and what happens when it's done. And so what is the more, right? So from my perspective, specifically based on the work we do at ED Platform, is the economic development side of it, right? So in South Africa, we've very fortunately built, I think, what has been one of the most pioneering developmental programs attached to the rollout of infrastructure, right? And a lot of you will know the bullet points in the second part here around the renewable energy program in South Africa has built within its very core, within its procurement requirements, its qualification requirements, its performance assessment requirements, these economic development elements: job creation, local content, skills development, the inclusion of management, diversified management, and other development spend contributions, very much aligned with the well-known BBBE, broad-based Black economic empowerment policy of the country. We managed to run a program over 12 years and counting, which has included these ED elements into it. For me, what this demonstrates is basically a procurement approach, an investment approach, which considers the local economy, both in terms of South Africa as a locality and the local community of each specific project site itself, as well as the people as core inputs into the project, right? So if we think of parts of the diagrams that Gracia had showed earlier, where we had inputs and we had production, use, reuse, we're not just talking about material, but we're also talking about economic players and people as being part of that cycle. So from an economic development perspective, when we think of people and local economies in that way, then the question is, how are we making sure that projects are being built and decommissioned and operated in their lifetime in a way that enhances those local inputs as well, being the local economy and local people, right? So if I step back and give an overview very, very quickly of what the Renewable Energy Program has done, here are the numbers. I won't read them all out, but there's about 3.6 billion rand of socioeconomic development funding that has been pledged by these projects over their 20-year lifespans, 92 billion in preferential procurement, 75 billion in local value chain, local content procurement, right? And about 9% shareholding by local communities. So there's a massive potential for these projects and these materials, not just to flow in a technical perspective, but also for benefit to flow, but also, not just benefit flowing and, a couple of people, get jobs, get a few procurement opportunities here, maybe get a bursary here, and then move on with their lives. But, and that's what we're trying to demonstrate in this bottom right picture here, is that we have the opportunity to drive investment in economic flow in a way that is sustainable, right? And what do we mean by that? So if these projects come in, we invest in them, and then they invest in terms of these job creation opportunities, skills development opportunities, socioeconomic opportunities into empowering local communities, right? And this is almost your regenerative material concept, so that over time, those local communities are no longer pure beneficiaries, right? They are more like partners, right? You're going into a community that has a skills base, that fully understands renewable energy projects, maybe including project developers from specific communities. You're going into areas where there are suppliers who have built sustainable, legitimate businesses that can qualify and feed into renewable energy value chains and the other ancillary services as well, right? You're going into an area that over time, with all of the billions of skills development funding that is being deployed through this infrastructure program, you're going into areas that have the skill sets that you're needing. So you're no longer needing to get other inputs or materials from elsewhere, but in the locality, again, the local being local to site, within the region, within the country, right? And you've also got sustained social infrastructure. And the importance of that is, when we build infrastructure in projects with, let's call it, extreme need and extreme social ills, it is more costly to build those projects because there's a lot more risk mitigation, so to speak, that has to be done, a lot more negotiation that has to be done, a lot more security measures that have to be put in place because the social ills manifest in different ways, right? And so the idea is, with all of this material and benefit flow, we actually create communities that have social infrastructure. Their social ills are being addressed systemically and over a long period of time, so that there are areas where, when you want to build projects, you are talking with, like I'm saying, not beneficiaries anymore, but partners, who are able and have been empowered to solve their own issues and can leverage this incoming investment, leverage their own community assets, leverage other economic and other sort of resources to deal with their societal issues, as they are everywhere, but also meet investors and developers and IPPs as equals, to say, right, we have land, we have skills, we have services, how do we partner on this project? And so really, this is the regenerative part, which then makes the next wave of renewable energy projects ones that are a different breed, also, so to speak. And then when you add that to the material flow, to say, look, in 20 years' time, we're going to have a massive material movement that either needs to get reused or needs to get repurposed or discarded in a sustainable way. And that community becomes part of the solutioning for that. And again, with an economic aspect to it as well. So what does it look like, right? We have 101 IPPs and growing in different communities throughout the entire country. And what we're championing is basically the circular economy in this context means, let's look at it from almost a systems thinking perspective, right? Let's look at it at a systemic perspective. Let's look at economies of scale, right? So these billions that we're talking about here, how do we look at them from a macro perspective and almost pool them, right, with a view of achieving what we've indicated here. Enhanced shareholding, enhanced project development in the local communities, enhanced local supply chains, and also allowing for interventions that are driven from a place of expertise. And what I mean by that is, as opposed to each IPP trying to figure out its own education intervention or its own health intervention or its own youth development intervention, taking that resource, that investment, and channeling it into a place where experts in sociology, in youth development, in business development, in social ills can actually be unlocked into these communities over a sustained period of time, with a view of being able to measure impact. So taking the time to put your markers in place, giving it 5 years, giving it 10 years, being able to look back, readjust. And that's, I think, the limitation that individual IPPs are faced with. Whereas if we step back and take the systemic approach, we can actually pool it for better impact, right? And then the last statement is, psychologically, you don't really want a situation where you've got renewable energy infrastructure, it's cutting edge, there's all these technical things being thought about. What do we do with the blades? What do we do with the panels? Juxtaposed with an energy poor community, right? And so part of that enhancement of the local input, being the people and the local economy, makes sure that we don't have this juxtaposition over time, right? Because that also has other political sort of implications and risks. And for me, this speaks to this last highlighted point, which is, I think, coming from the Ellen MacArthur definition as well. This is when we're starting to address those other global challenges, because the energy part is one part, the greenhouse emissions is one part, but the social ills that we have to address, I guess, as a country, but globally, are the other part. And this is, for me, the marriage of renewable energy, the circular economy, and these other global challenges that we have, and they're prevalent very much so in South Africa with its inequality. I'm going to leave this slide here while we close off, but really that is the idea of, beyond the technical, what is it that we incorporate, or how do we think of the circular economy in a way that centers it around the human? Because ultimately, all of these interventions, efficiency, climate change, global greenhouse gas emission reductions, carbon bans, they're all being done so that humans can have a better experience while preserving the earth. And so we're taking a similar approach with renewable energy and circularity to say, let's remember to put the people in the center. And what does that look like? And I think that's what I've hopefully presented to everybody here. But Gracia, I'm going to stop there and leave this lingering here for a little bit longer until the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Maloba. Great presentation. And I think that if we could, we would probably have another 30 minutes of questions. And I'm sure you sparked lots and lots of questions in the audience, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. So I would encourage everyone to put your question in the chat, and I think Maloba will be monitoring that as well. And also very happy to see that I think for this presentation spoke to the fourth principle of the circular economy, which is essentially benefiting members of society, particularly vulnerable ones. And in the context of the South Africa, as the industry grows, I think we expect really, like you've said, to move away from just ESG or ED from compliance purpose, but actually driving socioeconomic development in some of these remote communities. Right, without further ado, I think this is Maloba's contact details. If you want to get in touch with him, please feel free. He might also put it in the chat for anyone. The next speaker is Pravashan Naidu. I've also had the pleasure of working with Pravashan in my previous life. So I'll start by introducing him. Thank you very much, Pravashan. He's in the middle of quite a hectic due diligence process. So we're really honored that you could find the time to join us. Pravashan is the founder and managing director of eWest Africa. He holds a BSc in electromechanical engineering from the University of Cape Town and has received numerous academic awards and leadership awards. He was awarded the prestigious Abby Bailey Bursary, and his corporate experience included being plant manager for Unilever. E-Waste Africa is a waste management company that specializes in the storage, collection, transportation, recycling, beneficiation, and refurbishment of electronic waste. The company is ISO 9001 and 14001 accredited with patented technology and rapidly growing business model. E-Waste Africa has seen more than 70% year-on-year growth, turnover since COVID, and currently employs 38 staff members with various backgrounds from PhD in chemical engineering, environmental scientists, and lawyers. Over to you, Prabhashan. Are you able to share your screen?
Thanks, Kasha. Yes, I'm able to share.
Awesome.
Let me just get started. I'm conscious of the time, so I might brush through a few things
Yes,
on the
please. We have
presentation.
15 minutes.
Thank you
If you
very
could
much.
try and aim for 15 minutes, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
No, perfect. I did see a
Awesome.
question on the planetary boundaries in the chat, and I mean, one of the and just to understand what the real problem is, and we tend to forget what the problem is. You're asking the screen now, Kasha, the presentation. Perfect.
I'm seeing the screen. Yes, I can see.
So, I mean, everybody in this room would understand that we are obviously chasing the net zero transition, and there is a huge amount of money, trillions of dollars, that are actually going into this market in order to maintain what we call the 2-degree threshold. And it's very much limited in terms of, defined by the 9 planetary boundaries, climate impact only being one of them. The interesting part, I mean, this is from a Harvard regenerative economics class. The demand for steel and cement to increase anywhere by 62%, plastics 3 to 4 times. You would think that we're going down on plastics, but we're not. The problem is real, and the problem is escalating. The table on the right is just giving an indication of the amount of solar panels that have been imported into South Africa by China over the last few years and last few quarters. And you can see the massive increase up till the end of 2023. And I think everybody knows the reasons behind that. So I'm going to brush over this quite quickly because it's something I'm very passionate about. But a lot of people think climate impact is the be-all and end-all, but it's not. It's managing your oceans and seeing what the impact is on the oceans, our lands. The only sort of planetary boundary right now that has good control and it's not at any threshold is our atmospheric aerosol loading, or rather the ozone layer, basically. And I think we all know 30 years ago with CFC-free product, I mean, we can change things, and that's proof that it can be changed. If you follow me on LinkedIn, we can go through each of the 9 planetary boundaries. Happy to share outside of the session. Who we are, we actually turned 10 years old today, Gasha. So we were in Marathon with the DD, but we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary today. So it's quite crazy to think it's been 10 years.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So over the years, we were, I mean, E-Waste Africa, we are always going to be the complete electronic waste solution. But we did start off as lighting, and I think it's important to understand the reasons of our organic growth over the years. 2023, there was a legal ban of, or there was a gazette that was published that legally banned all lighting waste to landfill within 3 years of the gazette. And more importantly, right now, and for this forum, all electronic waste by 2021. And that gazette was actually published as early as 2013, August of 2013. So there is legislative compliance requirements that you have to meet. And just from a legal perspective, it is illegal to dump a solar panel. It is illegal to dump batteries, any type of electronic waste. So the energy transition industry is very much a part of not having to legally, or ensuring that we don't actually dump the goods. So there are solutions for recycling, and we are one of those solutions. What we fundamentally are stopping is the hazardous chemicals from leaching into both our lands, our streams, our rivers, and into our oceans. We know that there are finite natural resources. It's going to cost more to go deeper into the earth to get more resources at some point, and that's going to shift. But just to reuse and to recycle is critical from a carbon footprint perspective. More recently, and we still wait to see how this pans out, but producers, originally in South Africa, the polluter pays principle always applies. That hasn't fallen away, so the polluter is still responsible. But government has released something called the Extended Producer Responsibility Regulations, which now puts the onus back onto the producer as well. So, I mean, at the moment, we're busy rolling out these e-waste bins into the pick and pay stores nationally. And it is through EPR that was done, and sort of offers a free service for you to throw any of your electronic waste in. But it does cost money. From a solar perspective, and I mean, I've just taken these numbers from our, I mean, all of the data is validated. Just to give you an idea, Green Cape has said 900 tons of PV panels that have been put on the market that will need recycling for 2024 and 2,000 panels by 2026. If you speak to the recyclers out there, we believe that there's probably 3,000 panels available next year. So even the Green Cape report, physically, we think it's a hell of a lot more than what it's sitting right now from an analysis point of view. All the IPPs by 2034, you get your first round bids that are closing and the end of life. At that point, I mean, you get very low wattage panels and there's a lot more efficient panels now. So there's going to need to be a home for anywhere upwards of 10 million panels in a very short period of time. So just to understand, and it's important to understand what the direct solutions are. And it's also important to understand that it costs money to recycle. And there's this myth that people are making millions of rands from gold. If that was the case, we would have a lot more recycling. So what is not understood is that there is legal requirements to be able to collect and transport these waste streams. There are environmentally ethical and legally compliant recycling licenses that you need. So we hold something called a Big HH license in both our facilities in Johannesburg and Pietermaritzburg, where we are legally allowed to recycle all electronic waste. And it is defined in our annexure of our license. There's a cost for that. You've got to do a full EIA, yearly audit. We're not even talking the ISO audit solutions, an add-on for us. Then the cost negative components. Maybe just to go into the next slide and we'll come back, is that glass is perceived to be a great recycling, or South Africa is perceived to be a great glass recycling country, and we are not. So it's only food grade glass that is well recycled. There's no solution for windscreen glass. There's no solution for lighting glass or solar glass. So we have to be quite innovative in terms of designing a solution. And I'll take you through it in a little bit. I've got Mark sitting here opposite me, one of our chief technology officer, and we actually won a prize the other day at the V&A waterfront for the pavers that we make. And I think we forget to actually market what we do with the byproduct. But all of this costs money. There is a cost involved in terms of having to recycle these streams. And I mean, there are IPPs that are already on board and already doing this. One of the ways to reduce the cost is to move towards refurbishment. The possibilities of refurbishment that we're finding is not high. The IPPs are actually doing a really good job in terms of ensuring that their panels are well used. So those that are not working are genuinely not working. So the levels to be able to refurbish is not high, but ultimately it could really lower the cost of recycling. We are commissioning a refurbishment pilot plant at the moment, but we will be doing full refurbishment into next year. This is the product that we won the award for. So glass, solar panels is 80 to 90% glass, just depending on the layer. And so once you depollute the laminate out of it, you remove the aluminum frame. Not all solar panels are made equal. Not all solar panels have frames. People also assume that all solar panels have aluminum on them. So once you depollute it, we actually use it as a virgin material to go into pavers. These pavers, obviously, we have tensile strips, tests on them. We can go into the low-cost sort of hollow concrete blocks as well, but that's got a process still to go in terms of SABS or SANS certification. So the pavers is our main output at the moment. These pavers are actually 50% reused between the glass coming from our electronic waste, be it lighting, be it solar. Just a picture of what the pavers look like. And this is really downcycling. I mean, this is us deviating away from landfill. We do think that there are more efficient things to do later on, but we've got to solve so landfill is gone. Landfill is not even an option anymore. Recycling and beneficiating is now the bottom of the pyramid, and we've got to find ways to upcycle to create more value out of it. It's something that we spend a lot of time on, and we actually spend a hell of a lot of money on research and development in terms of trying to develop things, because they just don't exist in the world. Just to give you an idea on our physical impact, and I know we spoke about the carbon credits coming into play now. So in terms of our current impact, we validate our CO2 savings. Climate impact only has two measures. So there's no demystification that there's a 10,000 things that happen. You only measure climate impact through CO2 savings and through energy savings, so a CO2 equivalent. So just in terms of where we are right now, I mean, it's 38 sustainable jobs that we've created. We've got up to 15 indirect jobs that's indirectly linked to us. We are on track for 200 jobs by 2030. We go into some massive investment next year in terms of increasing our capacities. So we are aiming to get to 10,000 tons capacity, but that's across all electronic waste. We also control certain OEMs, electric vehicles, the EV batteries. So we do see a lot of EV batteries. There is not enough volume to justify a recycling facility just yet. So we are shipping that out via very stringent Basel application into Europe. I don't think that's going to last much longer because we are even struggling to find shipping liners that are willing to take batteries going forward. So the technology will come into South Africa. We will not have a choice. We just feel that it's going to be another 3 or 4 years before the volumes are sufficient. Let's talk about the IPPs. I mean, solar is probably the biggest waste stream that's going to come off it, but there are hundreds of other items. And I just put this list together. It's actually coming from one of the specific IPP entities, but there's a lot of electronic that need to be at the moment. So without going into too much detail, happy to share more on that. Just a little bit about our team. Dr. Williams is our Chief Technology Officer. We have patented technology that we've commissioned. We've created a lot of solutions in-house. I went to visit a solar recycling facility and they wanted to see how we were making our pavers, and we were quite scared that we'll copy the process. Antoinette's an attorney, but she heads up our region in Gauteng. Makoma heads up our region in Cape Town. She's moving down quite soon. And Lugelo's here in our Pietermaritzburg facility. Pravesh is our longest standing employee, and he heads up our SHUC and ISO leadership team. We are also quite conscious. We do have a stringent gender equity and social inclusiveness plan. So we will get to 50% in our leadership team in terms of female. And the design of our new facilities does incorporate people living with disabilities. To give you an example of what that means, we lower the dismantling tables that we do manually so we can have somebody in a wheelchair that can go behind the table. You got your air pneumatic tools, you got access to all your tools on the tables, and it works. For anybody here, we do offer sort of this free corporate activation days. We come to your factory or your head office or wherever that may be. We'll set up outside, we'll bring in bins and stuff just to educate your staff or people that are wanting to know more about electronic waste, and also just to provide a network for you to be able to collect these. We've done it with quite a few corporates, and we're finding that education is the hardest part, and it's going to take decades to get the education right around the hazards of electronic waste. So we are a fully licensed facility in KZN and Gauteng. We were voted amongst the Cleantech Global Top 50 to watch companies last year. We are winners of the Global Climate Impact Program as well, and we have seen multiple recognitions. Entrepreneurship is hard, business is hard, but these do help to motivate you that you know you're doing something different. Thank you, Gasha. I'm conscious of time, so I hope I didn't go too far.
Not at all. Actually, we had allowed an additional 5 minutes, so this is great. Thank you for helping us get back on track. Really appreciate it, and also congratulations. I met Pravashan a few years ago when he had just started his entrepreneurial journey, and it's really inspiring to see the growth. And you are a team of 38 people. These are real jobs that have been created. And I hope that with the growth of the renewable energy rollout, that your company continues to grow. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Gasha. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we've come to the fun part of the webinar. So this is an interactive session. I'll explain how this works. So Katerina, I'll just call you on this. We'll share a board where with 4 standard questions, and I can read you the questions. So the first question is, we'd love to hear from you. What opportunities have you identified for the implementation of circular principles in the renewable energy value chain? I think the speakers have done a great job at unpacking various opportunities, but we'd love to hear from you in your day-to-day. What barriers do you experience? The third question is, what feedback and input could you give the regulatory space to drive circularity in the renewable energy sector? And then last one would be, what is your commitment to bring forward circular economy at an organizational level? So this should work pretty well. We've tested it with previous webinars. If you click on one of the sort of post notes, you should be able to just add your name. You can see this is being currently done with the first question with the green, and provide your input. So we'll do that for about 10 minutes. We'll allow everyone to provide their input, and then I'll give the consolidated feedback. I'll read out what everyone's input has been. Is everyone comfortable? Is there any questions? Is anyone not able to get onto the board? All good?
Yeah, I think it looks quite positive, Gracia. I see quite a lot of people are on there.
Awesome.
Just to note, sometimes the whiteboard does crash, so I hope it doesn't happen this time around, but otherwise I will just relaunch it. You can zoom in and out on the bottom right-hand side as well, and you can also click on a little hand to grab the board and then go over it if you don't want to just write. So it's quite similar to a mirror board.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks a lot, Katerina. So we'll allow 10 minutes. We'll stop at 17 to 4, and I'll give consolidated feedback on the input, and then we'll hand over to Dr. Janita Badul from DFFE for the closing word. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good afternoon, everybody. Gracia, should I commence with the closing remarks? Because I'm not sure whether the screen has frozen on my side in terms of the whiteboard.
Janita, I think we're just going to give everyone time to fill in the whiteboard, but if you can maybe just confirm with me if it has actually frozen on your end, then I will reload it.
I don't see any activity on the screen on my side.
Okay. Is the same on your side, Gracia?
I can see the last 2 questions,
Okay.
but I'm not able to move as well. Quite right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what I will do is, sorry guys, I'm going to kick you quickly out of the whiteboard and just relaunch it, because that seems to sometimes happen with the whiteboard. Let me just quickly do that.
Maybe you
again.
want to actually respond to some of the questions raised in the chat in the meantime.
Correct. I think Katerina made the suggestion that maybe we should look at the question. So allow me to just go through.
Perfect. And then I think for those that are still writing on the whiteboard, the last time we had lots of engagements, and I do think we've heard quite a lot of insights today, especially also around the barriers, but also the opportunities and the commitments that we can make in the space. So I think it'd be great to hear everyone's insight, also maybe from a different sectors, right? Because the sector will be interlinked with, for example, manufacturing. And I think, Michelle, you also mentioned around the environmental impacts, so maybe biodiversity. Gracia, I think I'm going to give over to you regarding the questions then.
Right. Sorry, everyone. So is the first question from Michelle? Did I get it right? It was rather a comment.
Yeah, it was rather a comment.
Okay. And it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was during Maloba's presentation. And so Michelle's comment, Maloba, I'll allow you to also respond, was project preparation when it comes to large-scale renewable energy rollout is a big gap. That's one. And then when you were talking about, let's say, moving away from just ED compliance to finding scalable economic development opportunities for these communities, the comment was also that over and above that, she sees opportunities in environmental remediation. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think to speak to the project preparation, absolutely. I've seen cases where, you know, people who have actually got land and have prepared projects to the extent of their abilities, when it comes to negotiating part of ownership and sales, are found wanting, because it is a very complicated thing, right? But in South Africa, we know where wind projects are going to be. We know where solar projects are going to be. We know generally who owns the land where, and which land is community owned. And there's work that can be done in advance. But also, like I indicated, there's a lot of projects already in these areas, and the opportunity is to take some of that funding to prepare, right? To contribute into preparing communities, local stakeholders to be able to participate, right? And I fully agree with you in terms of the environmental remediation as well. Like Aradhana said, what is the site closure plan, right? These things are no different theoretically to our mind. What do you want to do when it's done? And how do we make sure that the environment, the physical environment, at least the ecology, is in a better state, right? And that's something that we should have policies and procurement regulations considered already with that in mind. So fully agreed with you, Michelle.
Okay. Thanks, Maloba. I'd encourage everyone to continue completing the board while we have the questions. So I think the next question will be, it's a comment also that Piotr put on the group. It's related to a comment that Piotr wrote. It's for you, Aradhana, and it's about carbon capture and storage. What would be your thoughts on its applicability in the context, particularly in the context of South Africa? There's been various views, especially from, I find from groups that, let's say, support expansion of further fossil fuels and or natural gas, on the role that it could play as a carbon sequestration, especially at scale, which is needed for the power sector in South Africa. So I'll kind of put you on the spot. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thanks, Gracia. I think, yeah, it is a controversial one. I think, you know, there's actually a pilot project going on with Hertzebande in Mpumalanga on this topic. So they're going a little bit further to actually explore what can actually come out of the carbon capture process in terms of new minerals. So it's quite an interesting one. And I think that's with the Council of Geosciences as well. But I think definitely the technology is not commercially ready in terms of the cost versus what you actually get out of it. So from a cost benefit perspective, I think we are not there yet. I mean, if it hasn't been adopted to scale in the European or US context, I don't think, you know, as a developing country, we should tap into it until all the lessons have been learned, personally. So I think that is the comment that I would put out there. But I also want to say that I think there would come a day where we definitely need it, because with Medupi and Kusile, they're only being built now, which means for the next 50 years, if you want to get that economic value out of it, we're going to have them running. And something has to give, because we have to reach our net zero goals. So In order for us to do that, we would have to implement carbon capture from my perspective. That's what I think. But yeah, I think the storage is also another issue in terms of where do we actually store it, and what it does to the environment as well. Yeah.
Great. Thanks a lot, Aradhna. I think that I'll direct my next question maybe to Pravashan, if you are still on the call, assuming you are. Yes. Pravashan, so thanks very much for your presentation. I haven't, kept up to date with some of the incentives and the development with the renewable energy sector, but what portions of the panels, or at least the equipment that was installed, say 10, maybe 15 years ago, do you think is currently being recycled? That's one. Two, based on your conversations with industry players, what plans are being put in place? So, I mean, what I see is ideally you should see this massive opportunity for business coming in the next 5, maybe 10 years, right? When all these plants reach end of life. But is that the conversation within industry at the moment? Is the gate fee attractive enough? Do you feel that there's capacity to be able to absorb all of that?
Yeah, to answer it, I mean, the volumes hit quicker than we even thought. And it's a number of issues. It's panels that were damaged. I mean, Cape Town had the whole hailstorm a few months ago. IPPs, some of them have defects, some of them are just the quality of the panels are not the greatest. So if I were to do the exact number and our estimates of what would probably be available in the market versus what is installed, so not what would be consumed from a yearly perspective, I would think about 1% of those panels are being recycled at the moment yearly, maybe a bit higher than that. And then long term, I mean, Green Cape's report actually does show the trend quite nicely. It shows that by 2034, you're going to have 2 million panels that needs to be recycled. And it talks to the installation from the 20 years ago with the first IPPs in 2013, 2014. We're finding that the big IPPs are great in terms of everybody wants to be legally compliant. It's obviously something that people are conscious of and need to be cognizant of, be it whether the panels don't go to landfill and ensuring that you can't hide a solar panel. You can't like take it out of your house and leave it at the dustbin outside and expect the garbage truck to pick it up. Nobody's going to take it. So we do believe the volumes will always exist in solar. And I think what's going to be important for future, especially from the consumer market, not necessarily the power producing market, is that there has to be infrastructure set up in order to get these panels back from each and every house. That is overtaking our residential or rooftop solar is growing massively. It's probably overtaken the IPPs at this stage, in my view, in terms of the wattage or generation capacity. And that's only going to grow even further at this stage. Hope I answered the question. Yeah, there's volume. It needs to be recycled. There's going to be, I mean, we're looking at increasing our capacity to 100,000 panels in the next 12 months. That's 2 million panels in 10 years' time that's going to need to be recycled. So, and that's in 1 year. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Pravashan. I think this just puts it into perspective, right? So I think what is good is that you have set up the infrastructure, and hopefully the call is for more a growing capacity, right, to be able to absorb the 2 million panels that will need to be recycled. But we're just talking panels, we're not talking mounting structures, we're not talking cables, we're not talking everything else, and we definitely are not talking yet about batteries. I think we'll keep that topic for another webinar because it deserves its own attention, and thank you very much. I think that we are right back on time, right? So thank you very much, everyone, for your input. I think we'll just consolidate everyone's feedback. If that's okay with you, I'll start reading through some of the input and the feedback that we've received before I hand over to Dr. Janita Badul for the closing words. Katerina, I'm so sorry. I'm going to ask you to zoom in slightly more because my eyesight, is I don't want to reveal my age, but that's how you know that I'm old.
Great. Is that work?
Yes, it is for now. I think it might be frozen, but for now, for the first half, definitely I can see. So, right. So what opportunities have you identified for the implementation of circular principles in the renewable energy value chain? I think from the audience, thank you, it's refurbishment, and I think Pravashan and Aradhana mentioned that. Community stakeholder engagement with a view to actually create partners and not just beneficiaries. Great point, and I think Maloba alluded to that in his presentation, including design into renewable technologies, correct? And from my experience in the energy sector, I think this is being done. A few of the battery manufacturers are already thinking about it from the start. More needs to be done, but there's early conversations. Upgrading the grid capacity, very important. I think if we increase generation capacity, and there's lots of work currently being done around that. I don't know if you're able to scroll down.
Like that. That's the last comment that we have on this one.
Is that the last one? Okay, maybe
Yes.
you could just read it. I think the screen might be frozen.
Oh, okay.
Because
So
it's not
then,
moving.
let me just see
Yeah,
what
there's
this.
another one.
Okay, let me just. Okay, thank you. So a national circular economy plan goal that considers both the RE, so the renewable energy growth trajectory, as well as other electronic consumables coming into the country, so that we have a concrete strategy to maximize these resource flows. Very, very wise, because I think the last study that was done was 2017 around the e-waste flows that we have in the country. So that has been quite a few years ago. Let me zoom out. Can everyone see that again when I zoom out or not?
No, I think that's fine. If you just agree to read the last sort of line of comments, that would be perfect, because the screen might be frozen on my end.
Okay.
And so I'll move on to the next question then.
Perfect.
What barriers do you experience? The first one is we need more specifically mandate collaboration between IPPs. I think 100% Maloba will agree with you, Pravashan will agree with you, and the industry will probably agree with you. The challenge is the IPP process, from my understanding, is quite cutthroat and super competitive. So I believe that while the intention and SAP-via the industry associations have done a great job at pulling the industry together, this remains still quite a competitive space. The second one is finance to scale out solutions and a response framework. The third one is collaboration and transparency and the availability of data across the value chain for the collective benefit. I think data is something that, especially when it comes to industry, generation data, I think great, but again, it's only at IPP and CNI scale, right? I don't know if data is necessarily being generated when it comes to like the residential space, and even more so like the small portable systems that we all bought when load shedding was quite prevalent, and what has happened to those systems in our houses, right? Then far too much political interference and other agendas. I know many people that would agree with this point, and then I'll hand over to you, Katerina, for the last one. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, let's do that. I don't have more on the yellow sticky tape side, so the barrier, so we can move on to the third question.
Okay, perfect. The third one is, I think this is quite small, so maybe I'll start. What feedback and input can you give on the regulatory space to drive circularity in the renewable energy sector? The first one is enforcement of existing regulations and legislation. I think Pravashan spoke about how the impact of regulation actually drove its business growth. And Aradhana also mentioned some of the policy instruments that could be used to drive that. The second one is law and action plans requiring e-waste management, circular waste management, and design of renewable energy equipment. The third is we need much more awareness raising and communication for various stakeholder groups. I think that's coming back to Pravashan's point about the fact that education for him is the hardest, and it will take decades to get right. And then lastly, circularity should be people-centric. As Maloba mentioned, the focus should be on things like energy, justice, and not necessarily, I don't know, at the moment.
electronic
yeah,
vehicles,
electronic vehicles, sorry, EVs at the moment. And if I'll hand over to you for the last two.
Cool, thank you. I think on the action plan and law and action plan requiring e-waste management, I mean, we do have EPR in place that's technically should also push design for renewable energy equipment. But again, that is also quite sometimes controversial how effective EPR is. But that again is another topic on its own, but obviously also needed. So then we also have a comment saying encouraging the development of prosumers to drive energy security and circular business models. I would assume that's involving the consumer more within the discussion, also understanding what it entails to actually install and use equipment. Well, finding ways to acknowledge efforts by companies and individuals that apply the principles. So really celebrating the successes. We do have quite a few success stories in the country. It sometimes looks a bit dire, but there is quite a lot of movement happening. And then also integrating principles into various regulatory frameworks across all of government. And then I can zoom out. I'm not sure, is this unstuck on your side? And then, Gracia, I'm not sure, are you able to see it for the last question, the commitment to bring forward circular economy in your own organization?
I think if you were to zoom, sorry, move to the left. At the moment, I still see the first three questions and not necessarily the last one.
Oh, I think there is a bit of lag actually. So maybe let me speak to it.
Correct, yeah.
Commitments, asking our participants what their commitments is on an organizational level towards circular economy is, one person said, working with renewable energy players to pool their resources and efforts towards higher impact and sustained interventions. And I think that also speaks to data sharing, right? And not just speaking or thinking about competition on the market, but collaboration and creating that powerful ecosystem. And then someone says that they're writing my MBA thesis on the policy that encourages and supports circular waste management for solar and wind, and hopefully share my findings with the industry. Perfect, that is fantastic. More research being done and more people actually digging deeper into the knowledge. And also engaging directly with industry and also the policy that we have in the country. Advocating for more intentional procurement. That's a very interesting comment. I would love to actually hear more about that from the person. I assume green procurement from a company's perspective. And then the last comment is on having energy audits on the organizational level. Once a baseline is known and understood, then we can obviously change it to a bit more sustainably. And obviously energy audits go beyond just energy. It can be waste, and it can also be water and other resources that an organization obviously is consuming. So with that, Gracia, I can hand it over to you. I think there was one last question from Michelle on if carbon capture is kind of a continuous issue. What about nature-based solutions? But I think that's a question for another day, Michelle, because I think we're starting to run out of time, but it's a very important and very interesting question to raise around nature-based solution as well within the context of circularity.
Agreed. Thanks a lot, Katerina. I think we've come to the end of our webinar series. I'd like to say a heartfelt thank you to our speakers. I think you will all agree that they've added tremendous value. They're all doing really exciting work and work that's moving the renewable energy industry forward in the context of South Africa. But even more so, usually we expect people to drop off relatively early, and I think that we've got more than half of the audience that stayed with us. So thank you very much again. I'll hand over to Dr. Janita Badul from DFFE for the closing words. Over to you, Dr. Badul.
Thank you so much, Gracia. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining in on the Circular Economy Imperatives discussion in the energy sector. This is indeed the last virtual session of a series of 4. And so I just wanted to reflect on 1 or 2 issues that has come out, for example, in the mining sector, and it links very closely to the energy sector. One of the case studies that we actually received was on using fly ash in the construction industry. However, given the potential of the project, there's always room for scale up. And I think if we need to see the impact in the medium to long term, we have to move out of pilots and demonstration level projects into at scale rollouts. That being said, I mean, taking into consideration that the energy sector is highly energy intensive, over and above that, it tends to follow a very linear business model. But it also has lots of green shoots that are appearing based on the presentations that we've received today as well, in terms of managing waste, in terms of recycling efforts. And the presentation that we received from Pravashin also on electrical and electronics. South Africa has been in that space for quite some time, but I think in the past it was about exporting the e-waste, and other countries actually taking over the mining of the electronics. But now happening back home is much better, because obviously it addresses the job creation, poverty alleviation, etc. And Gracia was quite providing appraisal on the e-Waste Africa initiative in terms of where they started off and where they now. So they slowly but surely, you can see progress over time. Now, what I wanted to also indicate, how is it that we could actually embed CE imperatives in the renewable energy sector? And I think Pravashin also touched briefly on it. So noting that whilst we're talking about a fossil fuel process of generating energy and the challenges associated with it in terms of carbon emissions, as well as the waste that is subsequently generated, the renewable energy sector has similar challenges in terms of the solar panels, as Pravashin used the example of redundant or damaged solar panels, etc. What do we do with it? And it's good that we already in that space applying ourselves in that regard, because it can become hazardous as well. But the potential is quite huge in terms of the recycling, reuse. I mean, utilizing low output solar panels, for example, in the rural areas would be excellent, and also saving in terms of the costs involved. Now, I think my last point on this is, however, as I've indicated, we need to move and ensure that we can undertake these interventions at scale. There have been policy adjustments to actually advance circularity. And that being said, I would want to also mention the in-person engagement, which will be held on the 14th of November. And Katerina, I'm not sure if the venue has been confirmed as yet, but we would love to see the colleagues who've been joining the virtual series, in person when the event does take place. There's much more that can be done in that session as well, in unlocking the potential for circularity across the different sectors. I would want to take this opportunity as well to thank our partners, GIZ, the German technical agency, the speakers who've availed themselves to present the excellent work that they are currently undertaking. And over and above that, you, the delegates who are still online, some of you. So thank you for that. And then finally, my gratitude goes out to Gracia, Katerina, Nobantu, the team at ASEN itself, who've been working behind the scenes to bring us the series of the virtual dialogues. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Badul. Really appreciate it. And I think with that, we have come to the end of our webinar series. Thanks again, everyone. As Katerina mentioned at the beginning, we recorded the webinar, so everyone that registered will get a link to the webinar and also access to the presentation slide. We just need to double check content-wise that they are comfortable sharing that, but you will receive an email from us. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you at the in-person event for those that can. Cheers, everyone. Bye.